Thanks for coming back this afternoon. We are going to get started, and we're very pleased that Betsy Hondorf, our local hero here from right here in town, and our former journal editor, is going to talk to us and give a great talk about parent power.
I hope.
So, thank you, Betsy.
Hi, thanks. Good to see everybody. I recognize most of you, and that's oops, probably moving too close here. That's nice, but also I was hoping to have some more folks. I probably am not going to say anything that you all don't already know, but maybe we could have a discussion about some of this stuff and clear up some questions that we both have. So this is me a couple of years ago, and I am currently Betsy Hondorf, but I'm doing some domestic restructuring, and there's no telling what my name might be in a couple of months. And I'm currently teaching at Oakridge High School, where I graduated from in 1988. And I am currently not coaching. I've tried, like many of you, to retire. Sadly, it didn't stick, and I'm back to summer league coaching starting about 2 weeks ago, and high school in another year. But most recently, I was at Farragut High School coaching, which is down here on the west end of town. If you drove in from the west, you probably drove by Farragut. And had a really great time. This was 2020, so right before COVID. So our state meets in February, and we snuck it in. And if you don't know me from that, then you might recognize either my face or my speaking as my writing voice. I was the journal editor for a long haul there, and I see some of my work is over here. So feel free to pick those up. Anyway, that's me, and you'll recognize the facility there. That's my home pool. I train with TNAC Masters, coach with TNAC from time to time, and our high school team practices here, and of course we host a lot of meets, But what I wanted to talk about today sort of came to me. Tim asked me to do this talk months ago, and I just sort of sat with it and figured that somewhere the universe would tell me what it was I was supposed to talk about, and I started to see stuff like this. High school coach quits mid-year because of abusive and vulgar parents. Football coach quits, blames harassment from parents. High school coach resigns due to parental politics. And then maybe you even get stuff like that. We don't probably see that on Pool Deck, but it's out there, right? And hopefully, things aren't that bad for you. We have a little more time probably than I'm going to talk. Does anybody have I almost quit, or I did quit, or I left that team because of some parental situation you'd be willing to share? I meant to bring Goo Goo clusters to give to people who would volunteer. Local candy. Yeah, if you do feel that way, or have ever felt that way, you're not alone. So this is a study conducted by AL.com, Alabama. They surveyed 500 high school coaches and assistant coaches, lots of different sports. Maybe not swimming. I'm not sure about the state of high school swimming in Alabama, but this was this year. And question number one was, have you ever quit or considered quitting because of parents? And 63% of coaches surveyed who responded said yeah, they have. So if you have ever done it or thought about doing it, you're not alone. And for those of us who've been around this block a couple of times, question two was, during your coaching career, has dealing with parents changed? And 60% said, yeah, it has, and it's worse. 29% said, no difference, and 11% says, yeah, it's better. So I'd like to meet those people. So, this is a problem, right? And I don't know how swimming works in every state, but in Tennessee, we are largely volunteer, parent-run. Our swimming organization is not sanctioned by our state athletic association, so we run that independently. So we don't have somebody at the state telling us when our meets are and who our officials are. We do that on our own. So in addition to the sort of normal things that I think everybody has parents help out with, like organizing banquets and stuff like that, we have them doing all the things, and sometimes that even extends to coaching. But the good news is, if you're lucky, you get one of these. This is Laura Austin, and you can have her. She's mine. She was my parent rep. Her son swam with me at Farragut and is now at the Air Force Academy in Colorado, not swimming, but is there, a great kid. And she's also a fantastic person. She was the team rep's math teacher at my school, and did all kinds of wonderful things, like made sure that we had cookies and Was in on the inside jokes. We had one link, the pool over here was, we're actually at the SAC pool, which is next door. It has 2 courses in there, and one of them, the 8 that marked the lane rope, was like oddly large font. And so we put kids in big 8 was the lane. You're lane 5, 6, 7, big 8. And so the big 8 got taken with us everywhere. And parents who are in tune enough with your team to know what the running joke for the year is, use their Photoshop skills to make we made this huge banner out of our senior swimmers, and take care of the banquet so that you can do stuff like this. Right? So this is the first year that we had snatched our region championship away from Maryville High School, which is a pretty big swimming power around here. So how can we make sure that we have good parents who support us, who make us happy, make our jobs easier, and avoid having the discomfort of grumpy parents or parents who are trying to get you fired or just making things more complicated. So I've got a couple ideas about that. Like I said, I don't have answers, but I have some ideas, and we can talk about ideas that you guys have around these things. And I divided up into these 4 kind of headings. Application. So like, what is it that we really need? And I think doing a lot of, we were talking before the meeting here about the more you can do up front, think really about what it is that you need, be clear about what you need, and set those expectations. With those expectations, your parents and other volunteers probably can do just about anything you need if you give them the right guidance and the framework to do that. And then what kind of preparation do you have to do? And it's hard work up front, but it will make your life so much easier. And if you do a really good job, you can coast off of it for years, right? And all of those things come together with communication. So these are kind of my big ideas about what we can do. So one of the things I think we have to think about is how do we find help? Right? So parents are the obvious solution to that because their kids are coming and therefore they're going to be coming and they should have a vested interest in their kids doing well. Sometimes, right? But they have challenges for making that happen too, right? So depending on when you have to have your meets, when your practices are, where you have to be, maybe your meets are right after school. Parents are working and that's just not an option for them. Or maybe you have to travel for all your meets and that's just not an option for some. Some parents may, decline to help because they want to just be there for their athlete. They want to watch their athlete and give them snacks. And that's a valid point. I think it's really important for us, if we're going to avoid conflicts and problems and misunderstandings, to understand where they're coming from. Another thing that if you've been a parent, I'm sure you're aware of, is volunteer fatigue. You get asked to do band, and you get asked to do chess club, and you get asked to, chaperone this and go to that, and all these things. And if you've got more than one kid, then it really compounds things even worse. And some setups may have booster organization issues. So again, this is a place where Tennessee is a little strange. TSSAA, our state high school athletic association, requires that all fundraising and that kind of thing be done through booster organizations. Since we are not part of that organization, maybe we don't have to. It depends on whether your school kind of treats you. So the schools that I've worked with sort of treat the swimming program as if we are sanctioned, even though we're not, which is nice. We get the recognition, but also we have to play by their rules. So sometimes booster organizations can be a help, but maybe you are in a school where you've got one grand booster organization and swimming can sometimes be the redheaded stepchild in that sort of situation. So, there are problems with finding the help that we need. And so one of the things I suggest is maybe ask a little bit less of parents so that we can ask them to do things the way that we want to. Okay, so if we're going to ask less of parents, but we still have these things that we have to get done, where are we going to come up with the people to get it done? So something that's worked pretty well for us is to find people to do some of the volunteer tasks that really don't require a whole lot of knowledge of swimming, to take those things off of parents, and then we can ask the parents to do the more significant things without feeling like we're over-asking, also keeping them from being over-involved. So one thing maybe you could do, depending on your situation, is incentivize some workers. So we use high school students from our service organizations as timers. And they get hours for that, and they can come and watch their friends and and be a timer, and then they get their hours for credit. Maybe you could invite workers to have some of your team meal, or give them a T-shirt or something like that, to encourage people who aren't parents to help out. Maybe teachers would be never mind. Other sports. So I have not done this here. When I coached in Georgia, this was pretty common. Swim parents worked soccer games. Soccer parents sold concessions at the tennis matches. The tennis people, so you didn't have to be in conflict with your own athletes' events. That can be a nice thing, or maybe you don't want to have to go to 2 athletic events. So maybe that's not a good situation for you, but maybe it is. This has been one of our most fun. Retirees. So we asked at our local senior center, anybody interested in coming and hanging out with young people and being involved in that. If you are going to the meet, you'll see that a lot of the people who are watching the doors and the exits and things like that are retirees. We used to put them in green shirts and call them green shirts, but then that got kind of a negative connotation, so now they wear regular clothes. But that's another pool of people who often have time and availability and an interest and a motivation in helping out. And almost anybody can be a timer, or stick labels on a ribbon, or that sort of thing. Oops, I got 2 ones there. Alumni. So if your alumni are local, or maybe you're having a bigger meet, you can invite them to come and help out. They know what's going on and can maybe do a little bit more. And maybe you want to combine that with like an alumni weekend or something like that. Yeah, it's a good opportunity to get to see people. I'm really lucky that I'm here on campus at UT, and so a lot of times we can find a graduate student or an undergraduate even that's either doing some kind of sports-related major, or again, the service organizations are looking for opportunities to do things. So if we had a sports medicine person who was particularly interested in working with swimmers, and came and sort of tagged around as a just sort of general go-for kind of person, and was at practice a couple times a week, and came to meets and just helped out, knew the kids by name and could find people. And then they got some exposure to athletics and competition and things like that. So it was a good trade-off if you can get that to work. And then bring a friend is a good strategy, right? So if you've got somebody who's a good worker and knows what's expected and stays within the parameters, like that person I want more of, ask them, say like, hey, who else could come and help us? Who else is a friend of yours who would enjoy being here, who likes these kinds of things? So if you can use any of these ideas to find a source of volunteers that doesn't have to be your parents, then you can have them focus on things that maybe they prefer to having to always be the one with the stopwatch. However, right, and this is I think where we always are going to have to circle back when we have this conversation, is parents are great, volunteers are great, but once you kind of let somebody into this circle of your program, you have to be aware of what their feelings are, what their motivations are. And be prepared for that. So one thing that maybe you've seen is you have parents who want to be your best friend and do everything for you, and we're going to make this so great, and can Billy be the anchor on the relay? And you're like, no. Like most other things, communication generally can solve this problem. We'll talk about it a little bit later on. We talk about what kind of tasks do you have to get done, and which things can other people help out with, and then how far do you want them to be able to go with that, and what are the limits of where they're allowed to exert influence, and which things are off limits for that. And I think it is really important, and I have found that it's easier to just stand up at the very beginning and say, everybody's got to help out, we'll find a place to make it comfortable for you. But that's the expectation, that's not an extra, and don't expect extra compensation for that. And be very detailed and specific. And again, we'll talk about this a little bit more, about what tasks that you want these people to do, when it needs to be done, who to talk to when they run into problems, and those kinds of things. So if you can think about that ahead of time, which as experienced coaches you can, if we have new coaches, you might want to get an experienced coach to help you. And then the last thing here, which might be a little unpopular, Particularly if you're coming into a new situation, it's a good idea to kind of ask around, like, who are people that I can count on, who's reliable, who's, helped out with other programs, and also, who tends to be difficult, who really needs personal attention, who am I going to have to communicate with clearly, who has a situation that I, need to know about in order to understand where they're coming from. And if you've got a good athletic director, they may know these things. You might talk to other coaches, other teachers. And it's really kind of a tricky line, I think, to not get into just gossiping about people, right? We don't want to do that. But I think it's important to know who has a reputation for being helpful. And if those are people at the beginning, maybe you can lean on a little bit more. And then who do you need to kind of be more cautious with and make sure that you're very direct and clear about communicating with. So we don't mean this to be like, ooh, I'm going to find out who the bad guys are and spill the tea, but, just kind of know who's got which kind of skills, let's put it that way. Fortunately, most volunteers are really fabulous. And if you get people who say they will work and do things for you, they will do the best they can, as happily as they can. And I think most people who are involved with youth sports are pretty happy to do that. All right, so here's the expectation bit. And this is going to be different for everybody. And I think probably everybody who's been doing this for a long time would agree that it changes over time. And that's okay too. But we need to think about what are the relationships between coaches, parents, and athletes. And for me, this is like where I want to start building the foundation of a program. I want everybody to understand what their role is, what they're expected to do, what they're expected to not do, and how we can all work together to make all of it come together. So here are some ideas of things that I might use that I think coaches are responsible for and that parents and athletes are responsible for. So, this is just an example of things that I think I need to do, right? It's my job to communicate everything. Okay? Ultimately, I think will come down to the key to all of this, to making your team run smoothly, to keeping parents happy, to keeping administration happy. All those things come from good communication skills. So that's key. Even I was talking about a coach maybe is a fantastic person and really relates to kids, but can't get the paperwork together. And that just does not work. So you got to do that. Obviously, workouts and competitions, that's what we're paid to do. Maintain a culture. And that's a whole other talk, right? What's the culture of your team like? What do we want to project? And that's something that comes from the coach, I think. Instruction and teaching, and I would venture that just includes things beyond like technique in the pool, but also things like time management and stress management and how to be a better competitor and a better teammate. So all those kinds of things. Of course, keeping up with our many certifications and education requirements. You've got to probably do your concussion, your sudden cardiac arrest, and the child safety, all that stuff. And then on top of that, you have to keep it fun. So when you start to think like, oh my gosh, I'm doing all this. So that's what I want to do, right? Or that's what I'm gonna do, whether I want to or not. Parents, I think these are the things that they should do. And there could, definitely be lots more or maybe fewer depending on your situation. But, if I'm gonna communicate, I need them to always check that communication and respond if they're supposed to. Right? It doesn't do me any good if I'm just blasting all this information out into the universe and nobody receives it. So I think it's really important up front to train anybody who's working in your program to be receptive to the communication that you're producing and respond, when they're supposed to. Relay athlete concerns. So, Susie's grandmother passed away, so she may be, a little out of it here for a couple of days. That's a thing I want to know that maybe Susie's not going to tell me, but it helps me be a better, coach. And a parent, that's appropriate, right? I don't want to talk about, Susie's math grade every week or whatever, but things that they know that would help me be a better coach to their athlete, that's important. Okay. And I think you need to have a system for like how we do that. Like, is that okay for you if they walk up and talk to you on pool deck? It's not for me, but it might be for you. Okay. Can they send me a text message? I'm not okay with that either, but we do have a communication system, and that would be appropriate. Even a phone call if that's what's needed. Obviously, pay your fees and your dues, right? These things don't happen without money. Don't make me be chasing you down and trying to break your knees, get your money out of you. Since a lot of our athletes don't drive themselves, it's on their parents to get them there. And, we can't directly punish the parent, but, if they're keeping the kid from getting there on time, then that's on them. My ex-husband used to arrive late to practice fairly often with my children, our children, and then he would punish them for being late, like make them do laps. You're late. It lunges. You may be late. Well, it's your problem. Be supportive, and how you are going to phrase that and communicate that with your parents and volunteers, can be a personal choice. But I think it's important, again, at the very beginning, to be clear that that's what you are here for. You are here to be supportive of your athletes and supportive of the coaches. That doesn't mean you're always going to be happy. You're not always going to be happy with your athletes. You're not always going to be happy with the coaches. No one's requiring that. But if you are unhappy, then you have to manage that in a way that remains supportive. You can't be destructive when you get unhappy. Right? And then specific volunteer tasks. So like we have to have officials. And in Tennessee, you probably have your parents being the officials. We don't have a pool of officials that get assigned to our meets. Just find whoever you can find. Athletes, their job's pretty easy. Work hard, stay positive, which is easier if your coach is making swimming fun and your parents are being supportive. Be coachable, be prepared, be supportive. And if everybody does these things, I think things work. Anybody got any, did I miss any big ones? Ideas that you can't do without? All right, so we know we need them. We need volunteers, probably parents. We need them to know their role. We need them to know what our expectations as far as their behavior, their kind of beliefs about our program, the philosophy about our program. But we also need them to actually do some stuff, right? So start thinking about the tasks that each person has, right? So these are the things I'm responsible for. What tasks am I going to have to do? So I have to write the practices and run them. I'm going to do meet entries. And so here's one where, maybe I'm old school. When I do meet entries, I print out a piece of paper with a grid and every event and every kid's name. And that's, for me, the way to move people around and make sure all people back-to-back events or swim in too many things. But then that has to get put into whatever your meet management system is. And at the moment, I'm still doing that myself, but that's a task that I imagine once I have created the meet lineup, then maybe I can have somebody else put into a program. Now, if I did that, I want to be very explicit about this. It has to go exactly the way I put it. If you think there's a mistake, flag it and let me know, but don't change anything. Those are the places where being really clear about your expectations and what the limits are can save you some pain up front. I used to want every kid, we use paper cards in most of our dual meets, and I used to want every kid to come get their paper card from me because I want to talk to them before the race. But I did decide that just got crazy. So now I have either a card mom or a student volunteer who has the cards and stays near me, so the kids are coming if I need to talk to them. Otherwise, it can be just like a good luck, let's go. So they're around, but I'm not shuffling cards around. So you can change your mind. Gear, like I want to know what's on our t-shirt. I want that to come from me and my captains or me and my team. I usually let them pick out their team suits and things like this year we want jackets and this year we want short sleeve shirts and this year we want booty shorts or whatever. But I want that to come from me. Although a lot of people are comfortable just saying some parent pick out our t-shirt and things. Whatever's important to you, right? Volunteers who are maybe not parents and maybe don't know anything about swimmers and swimming, what can they do? They can definitely be timers. They can be runners. Maybe, if you're lucky, you've got some officials that aren't parents, right? We have been lucky enough to have some folks who just kind of stayed around. It's like we forgot to tell them their kids are gone and they just keep showing up at swimming meets, and it's great. Sticking things on ribbons, refilling water, whatever. There are all kinds of things that don't really require any knowledge of the sport or really any direct supervision other than just keep an eye on this and make sure that it's done. But then you want your parents maybe to have a little bit deeper understanding. And if you get these people, then that frees up your parents to do those things, and they like those things, right? They like to do the banquet. Like, I always have a huge committee for people who want to do the banquet. They want to do decorations and have a DJ, and fine. I just want to show up at the banquet, talk about how much I love my kids, and hand out prizes. So great. I don't care if we eat chicken, whatever. You probably need a parent rep. Anybody not have to have that? I figure we all do. Fundraising, sadly, is probably something that we need to do, and parents have a pretty good idea of what works and what doesn't, what's already being done at the elementary schools. Let's don't do that. Maybe contacts. At Farragut, we were lucky enough to be able to have team meals the day before a meet. We got a special kind of athlete section of the cafeteria, and parents could bring in stuff. Yeah.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
My teams the parents had gotten so sick of fundraising projects
Mm-hmm.
through elementary, through middle school.
It's terrible.
By the time they got to high school, they just preferred.
To write a check.
That's right.
Yep.
They preferred, and they had a meeting, and they discuss it among themselves and decide what they wanted to donate. And if there were people who couldn't donate as much, or people who could donate more,
Yep.
they would do that. And they didn't want to do fundraising.
I think that's fantastic. I did a international travel trip because my youngest son wanted to go to Scandinavia, and that organization that we funded that travel through had a just sort of a one day, send it to everybody like your parents, grandparents, whatever. And I'm not selling you anything, just how about somebody
Well, and we
$20?
paid for kids who couldn't afford.
Exactly.
Every other year we went from Colorado to California.
Mm-hmm.
And there were kids, even though we were in a wealthy school.
Yeah.
There were still plenty of kids who couldn't afford it.
And that's
We had to
why,
help them.
yeah, and that's a fantastic example of why you need to have parents involved in your program, because they know things about what they've been selling since they were in kindergarten, and they know things about who can and can't, and they know things about ways to get things done. So yeah, absolutely, I think that's a fantastic solution to fundraising.
I was involved in that because I was the one that had to tell them or get the money from them to pay for people who could not afford it.
Right.
Because it wasn't something they wanted to tell.
Right. Right.
In sort of a secret.
Right. Well, and that's sensitive, so that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. But anyway, whichever tasks you decide on, and I think this is something that's worth ruminating on a little bit. I wouldn't take it to the beach with you. That's kind of miserable. But if you're on the bus on the way home from your state meet, maybe thinking towards next year, like what tasks did I do that I really don't think I need to do, don't want to do anymore? And what tasks did we need to get done that didn't get done? And try and really compile a complete list of the tasks that have to get done and then who's going to do them. Then it's a little bit easier to try and find the folks to fit the job, right? So this is a little bit about what our season looks like. So we swim boys and girls together. And Holly, what time do you guys start? Like right after Labor Day with practice? Okay, October. So sometime September, October, high school practice starts, and our state meets in February, middle of February. So for me, I do a lot of paperwork and stuff in July. I go back to school on July 17th. I am on my first of 2 weeks of spring break right now, but I go back to school on July 17th. And I do have some time before students roll in, and definitely time before practice gets going, to think about things that I need to do ahead of time. And so, fortunately, I got most of this stuff done from past years of experience. But if I were starting off, I would try really hard to think ahead of time, or ask somebody who'd been around the block a couple times what things have to be done at what times, and how much of that can I do ahead of time. And part of the reason I want to do it ahead of time is so I don't have to deal with this stuff when I'm dealing with kids, because I want to focus on them. And part of why I want to do it ahead of time is so I can make sure that if there's anything that anyone else needs to do, that I let them know about it way in advance and get on their calendar and already be locked in for those things. So, in July, I'm doing things like the paperwork that I have to do for the university, making sure all my kids have their physicals, that we've got permission forms all ready to go. We were talking before most people came in about physical stuff versus digital stuff. My school does do online. You can submit your physical digitally, but I still give everybody a packet with all the papers. So they've got them. I like to schedule our meets way ahead of time. So we have a scheduling meeting here for our Knoxville region in October. Okay, but I like to have, as much as possible, the dates, locations, and times of all of our meets before we get started. So when I have a parent meeting at the beginning of the season, I can put that in their hand and say, put this on your calendar now. And that way, if anything else comes up, you'll say, sorry, I can't, I already have a swim meet. Obviously funerals and things like that accepted, but it cuts down a lot of, well, I was already doing, whatever. Important dates, things like, when are we having our banquet? When is our Christmas training kind of session going to be? Are we having a spaghetti supper? Any of the other things, fundraising night and Brick's Pizza, when are we going to do that? So as much as possible, we get the dates on a calendar for everybody ahead of the season, and pick out gear. And I usually do that with my captains in July, right before school starts. And then these other things, these are when they happen, but I'm still going to try and do them as much as possible here, right? So I'm going to set up all my communication mechanisms, and some of those I get to choose, and some of them I have to use. I'm going to plan for any kind of emergency thing. Do we have a backup pool in case we don't have one for how long?
It'll be 2 years by the time they get done with it.
For 2 years, where are you going to go? Start lining up volunteers. I've got these needs. Here are the tasks I need done. Where am I going to find the people to fill these things and get those things checked off? Through the middle of the season, what's going to happen? How are we going to change things when we get into taper? I want everybody to know that ahead of time. So normally we have 1.5 hours water time. When we get down to taper, and maybe I only have my state kids. I might split boys first and girls second, and keep them separate, or something like that. What are you going to do? What are your expectations during this taper time? Okay, again, the money stuff. Okay, who's paying for meet entries? Is it your school? Is it your program? Is it the individuals? I think this is a really big one to be very clear about up front, probably put in writing somewhere. How do we decide who's going? And mostly that's probably relays. How do we decide who's swimming what events? So my philosophy is that at our region meet, you swim whatever you want. When we get to state meet, we're trying to score team points. And so I'm not going to put 6 people in the 50 free where somebody's going to bump somebody else out if that person can score. So I want everybody to understand that at some point they get to decide, at some point I'm deciding. And I think if you say that up front, you avoid a lot of problems. When you finally get down to your championship season, do you have hotel rooms? Apparently we're going to Nashville from now on. Is that what I heard? Things were stolen out of the varsity locker room, and so we can't go back to Utah. So now I have to figure out how to travel to Nashville every year, find a hotel in Nashville, which is impossible. What are our travel expectations? I want everybody to know that up front. Who's allowed where, when, who's answering to who's making arrangements. Is it me? Is it families? Is it someone else? And again, costs for those things. And then I already want, before we even get started, I want to know who's in charge of my banquet. I want to be planning on my NISCO awards already, right? I'm looking at my seniors. I'm already checking their grades to see who's going to be an academic All-American. And I want to, know what those times are and start getting those things set up and ready so I don't spend the last 3 days before they're due trying to get that stuff crazy. And then thinking about what's off season. So around here, high school just sort of it disappears. Our kids who don't swim club take a month or so off and then start swimming with their summer league programs. But some places you may have off-season things that you do. Maybe you're responsible for training your athletes outside the season. So the more you can think about that and produce any kind of documents that are required, fill any needs, fill any roles that are required, the more of that you can do up front gives you more time later and is more likely to result in a volunteer experience that everyone's happy with. So I strongly suggest if you can find the time to work on this kind of stuff ahead of time for everybody's benefit. Okay, so all that stuff is great. I'm also a physics teacher, and I tell my science students, right, you can do all kinds of great science, like you could master cold fusion, but if you can't communicate that well, then it doesn't matter whether you did it or not. It's completely meaningless. And this is all true, right? So everything we've already talked about, those things are, I think really important. And thinking about it and being deliberate about it is really important. But if you don't get that information out, then you're back to square zero. So I am a team handbook person. Apparently she is also. I've had parents tell me, so this was a surprise for me. They're like, we like this. We write down their times in it. Maybe we stick a picture in there. So I make, and I brought a couple of them, I make a team handbook that's got everything. I didn't print out the fancy cover, which I'm kind of sad about, but it's got an introduction that has things like team philosophy and staff introductions, things about practices, what the expectations are, attendance policies, meet stuff, our booster club stuff. I've got parent-coach swimmer interaction, that triangle, where I outline exactly what I expect everybody to do and be responsible for. Finances, where are we going to get the money and where's it going? I put in here records. It's actually not in this one because as of the printing of this one, we didn't know what they were. But we have those now. Qualifying standards for our region meet and our state meet. Maybe you want to put NISCA All-American qualifying standards in there. I've got a glossary in the back because sometimes you get parents who, they don't know what heats are and they don't know what circle seating means. And so some of the, they can read through it, they can enjoy it if they want. We usually put some, special things like the Fat 8 and stuff like that are specific to our team so that people who are coming in new will kind of get the inside jokes. We put directions to all of our away meets and then all the forms, even the ones that can be done digitally. So even the physical form, all that stuff that gets submitted to the school digitally, I still put one in there. And then I usually put in a couple extra pages with a couple of pictures from last year or something like that. And a lot of parents love that. So we may be getting to the place where parents are more of the digital age. I didn't grow up in the digital age. I grew up with a paper handbook, and that's what I'm used to, and that makes me comfortable. And a lot of your parents are probably still there, right? And they can just keep it on the kitchen counter, and then they know where everything is. Maybe your school already has a format that they require. Our school does require you to have some kind of handbook on the school website. So I just put a link to this. The football coaches usually put like a Word document with 3 lines on it, but whatever, but we have to have something. If you are interested in this and want inspiration, on our handy dandy NISCA online website are all kinds of team packets. We just sort of gathered them up as people. I think Eve's got one of mine's up there. There's a bunch, and you can cut and paste, and you can see what works for you. And that's great. If you are completely digital, and that's what works for you, set up a web page with like links to each of these topics or something. But somewhere, every parent needs to be able to access the answers to all of these questions, right? They need to know exactly what's expected of them, where they're supposed to be, what their kid's supposed to do. So put that somewhere. So these are some digital tools that you may already be familiar with, and you may be required to be familiar with. There are probably more. These are the ones that I've ended up using a lot, so I want to talk just briefly about each one. We use Team Unify for club swimming. I don't know if that's a requirement, if we just do. But our local summer league and our high school region require Swimtopia. So most coaches in my area are familiar with that. A lot of coaches do both and nothing else. So this one does have meet management in it, which is pretty easy to use. So that one's pretty good. It has some messaging apps and things like that. And that was one of the things I love to like decorate websites and things like that. I am not Julian caliber webmaster, but I like that. But this one just got out of hand for me pretty quickly. And so I have a team webmaster who does most of my Swimtopia stuff, and I mostly just use that for meet entries. Heya is a new find for me. Anybody else using Heya? Yeah, as the name probably hints at, this is a Scandinavian product, but it's in English, and it has been fantastic. So if you are not happy with your current digital tools, I recommend checking this one out just personally. It has scheduling, so you can sit down at the beginning of the year and like put in your practice schedule, and it's really easy to do, like 1 week, and then copy this until whenever, but you can make changes to it. You make changes on the fly, and it automatically sends out an email. But the thing I like best about this one is that it allows parents to communicate directly with each other. So like carpools and stuff, it was amazing. And coordinating things like who's bringing the bus snacks this time and things went really, really well with that. And you can instantly message everybody, and people can message you. Remind's another one of these. My school uses Remind, so we also have a kind of side Remind thing going on. Both of these are nice because they do have that privacy protection, that level of where you can send a message to an athlete, but it's not coming from your phone directly, and it's visible to whoever selects it. Those kinds of safety features. But if you're not using one of these, you probably are doing way too much work. You also probably are required to use one of these, and you're just not doing it. But again, the key thing here, what we're trying to do is we've done all this work and all this planning. We have these ideas about what we want people to do, what we want them to not do. And this is the way that we make sure that they are, getting that information and know what's going on all the time. And I'm sure there are a lot more. Anybody use something that's not up here that you just think is fantastic? I'm always looking for more of them. Okay. And we used the free version of Heya and found it to be fantastic, but there is a premium version, which I haven't really checked out. All right, so you do all this stuff, right? Do all this stuff. And you're still going to run into some difficult parents. So I was talking with Arvel, I think, about somebody who, gosh, what were you saying? Oh, played favorites. Yeah, you can't do that, right? So if you've done this for very long or taught for very long, you probably know that sometimes a kid walks in and you're like, this is not my favorite kid. But you can't let the kids know that, right? You absolutely cannot let them know that. You could like harbor it in your little heart of hearts, but you can't do that. And the same thing is true about parents. We know that there are some out there that are tricky. And if you don't know, usually you find out pretty quickly that they're tricky. But you can't just be like, well, I hate that person. You have to try and make it work. And, understanding where they're coming from can help a lot. What we talked about there at the very beginning. What are the obstacles here? What's causing the problem? And communication, generally is the answer to that, right? So talk to them. Like, what are we really talking about here? Like, what is your issue? Like, what do we not communicate clearly, and how can we re-explain this? And can you explain your point to me? And if you start to feel like this is going a little south, document, right? As soon as you get that, this feels like it can be going in the wrong place. And it doesn't have to be like, I'm going to record everything you say, but just like make a note in your journal or wherever you keep things, like spoke with Bobby's parents today, here were the ideas, the things we talked about. Because you may need to take this to somebody else, right? Maybe it's your athletic director. Maybe it doesn't require that, right? Maybe you've got a parent on the team who sort of sees the whole picture and can, help you bridge the gap and meet that parent in the middle. What I did want to have a little bit of discussion about, though, and I've seen this thread come up a couple times in some coaching groups, is at some point, maybe there just are some people who just are going to not be productive and not get on board. And I put a question mark here because I'm just not super comfortable with that, right? I wouldn't be comfortable with, this is a kid who just can't get it together, unless they're bringing drugs and being that kind of disruptive, right? If they're just sort of, you got to make it work. So, I think last option is some kind of ultimatum, like, you're just being too disruptive to this program. So, the first slides we talked about, where coach leaves because of this, coach quits because of that. How do we avoid that? How do we enjoy our jobs and do what we want to do the best we can? I think sometimes that does mean you say to a parent, please keep dropping Bobby off, but you should probably just stay.
customer is always right, but they do not have to be the customer.
Right. Right. So, and, you know, before you get to this, for sure, you should have done this one and probably have at least a couple other people on board. You know, no one wants to get that far, because once you're to the point where you're having meetings with the AD, then you're spending way more time on whatever this issue is and not doing the part of coaching that's the reason we all got into coaching. So, you know, back it up, and what can you do to prevent that? How can you make everybody prepared? Will help you avoid this as much as possible. But I think it would be, you know, really pie in the sky and kind of ridiculous to say, yeah, if you do all the planning, you'll never have any problems. No, I mean, you're always going to. And maybe you find out that whoever's being obnoxious, you know, their parent just died, or, you know, they never got to play on the A team and they're, you know, living vicariously. Whatever, you know, if you can understand kind of what their issue is and where they're coming from, communicate about it a little bit better, you can probably at least get it down to a point where you can manage it throughout your season. Anybody have any great strategies for difficult parents?
You can just say, sometimes difficult parents stay with you for many years.
They can.
I mean, I coach tennis also. And it's been 15 years since I coached tennis. And I still have difficult parents from there contacting me.
Yeah.
You've got to see my son do this, follow him, look at him. See
Yeah.
him.
Yeah. And how do you respond to that?
I'm to the point where I do not respond anymore.
And sometimes that's the best approach, right? Sometimes that's really just all you can do. Yeah.
At my previous high school, I had a parent that, well, I had two of the boys, and they never said anything to me. They tried to corner my assistant coach in the office before a first swim meet of the season, to go off on them about me.
Right.
Or some issue that they had, and they never would come to me.
Right.
So you just kind of have to be aware of that and warn your staff as well.
I absolutely think that's true. And I think,
Because you were so scary.
yeah, horrible, you're terrifying. No, I think that's absolutely right. And you know, if you've been through a situation like that, then maybe part of your, you know, early process and part of your discussion about communication is, you know, who do you go to, right? You know, if you're an athlete and you're disgruntled, do you go straight to the coach? Do you have a captain you can talk to? Is it appropriate to talk to the assistant coach? Who talks to whom and when, and, you know, for what reasons? But right, so you know, once we get to the point where athletes are bitching about the coach to someone else, then we have a problem, right?
I had looked at this from a point of, a lot of times the parents are being difficult, so like, they just have a little bit too much free time on their hands.
Mm-hmm.
And I find things for them to do.
Oh, yeah.
And it's usually a task that's kind of different, like researching up-tops costs, outfitting stuff, travel stuff. Hey, team meals, we're going here. Would you mind getting this all set up for 60 kids?
Because that takes forever and I don't have time to do it.
Exactly.
I don't care.
Oh,
Yes.
And that has helped quite a bit. It helps
So,
with the
right,
relationship, because you give them the thank you so much for
Right.
your help, and give them that recognition. So
And they feel good.
They feel good about it.
So, right, so this is a thing when you're going through that, what are the tasks and who can do them? If you have been around a little bit, or if you've done a little bit of background research, you know this is a person who will get into trouble if you don't. So start looking at your list of tasks, and yeah.
And for my parents, we have a core group, and we sit down each spring, and we look at who's leading, and who do the parents do would be good people to fill certain new roles.
Find your replacement. Yes.
And they go through the training process, and that keeps things moving.
Right, fantastic. And they know who's good to work with, and they wouldn't bring you a lemon. Yeah.
Right, and which parent dynamics you want to avoid.
Right.
in groups too.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I actually wanted to talk about the difficult parents as a young female coach, because I assume that at some point you ran into that, right? So as a young female coach, if you have these often men who feel like they can bully you into doing whatever it is they want. Do you remember how you dealt with that?
I usually passed off somebody else as a young female coach. Anymore, I wouldn't, but I don't get that kind of trouble anymore. What'd you do?
I would listen and say, yep, that's okay. And then I would go off and do whatever we've been doing, and if they didn't like it, they could talk to my AD about it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you're gonna, I don't know which is worse. I used to think that parents who knew nothing about swimming and were, very concerned about their child, understandably, concerned about their money and concerned about the use of their time, all these things are understandable, and didn't know anything about swimming. I was like, ooh, that's just, that never works. It's taken me a while to realize that the parents who actually know something about swimming may actually be worse. Yeah, so I noticed that Bobby's putting his head underwater on the breaststroke. I don't think that's legal. We've changed that rule. Yeah, so there's just no set answer, sadly, for that. A lot of what happens is going to depend on whether your administration is in touch and supportive and, will, help you, or whether they maybe are, some of our swim teams here in Tennessee, their schools don't want to associate with them at all. You're not a TSSAA sport, our insurance doesn't cover you, you can have a team, you can call it, our town team, but, and their administration won't help at all. And then, I guess sometimes if you're really unfortunate, you might get an administrator who, that person is the problem, and then you're really, maybe you ought to just go somewhere else. Anyway, that's what I had to say. We do still, I actually talked about it a long time. We have a couple of minutes. Anybody like to add anything?
You've done a great job, by the way. I love to follow you on Facebook.
Thank you. Now that I've been riding motorcycles all the time. Pretty soon it'll be more swimming pictures. Dana?
Is your team handbook going to be added to our team packet page?
If it's not, it will be, and I brought some hard copies, but yeah, I'll give it to, I think it's already in there.
I think so too.
Yeah, I did a journal article about team handbooks, and I think I noticed mine wasn't there and sent it then. But I absolutely will. I always have the kids make a cover for the next year. So like they can kind of talk about what they want the theme to be, and it's their artwork. And it's just like a tiny little yearbook. It makes it a little bit better than, here's a bunch of rules. And they like that a little bit better. So maybe that's something to think about. All right, well, thanks so much for having me. It's good to see everybody. Welcome to Knoxville. Thanks. Even if you don't have that, I will send it.
It looks like, yeah, no,